Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I wanted to do a quick video talking about temptations and what the Bible says about it. So let's take a look at James chapter 1 verses 2 to 3. It says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." So we can see here that God uses temptations to test people. Now we'll see here in some other verses that God isn't tempting people directly. He is not the tempter, Satan is. However, he uses the temptations for his purpose to test people and to try our faith. So if we look at James chapter 1 verse 13, it says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man." And so we can see here that God doesn't tempt people. He just uses those temptations to test people. And when we look deeper, the best example I can give is the book of Job. Because remember, God approached Satan first. And so Satan was the one tempting Job. He was directly inflicting the trials on Job, tempting him to curse God. God wasn't doing that. However, God was using that to test Job. And so he approached Satan first in that case, and he used those trials to test Job, to test his faith. However, God wasn't directly doing that. Satan was directly inflicting those trials and temptations onto Job. And if we look at James chapter 1 verse 14, it says, "But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed." And so Satan uses the lust of our flesh to try to entice us. That's exactly what he did with Jesus in the wilderness, because Jesus has the same human flesh as us, right? Because he is God who came into the flesh. And so he has the same temptations, the same sufferings as us, and he can relate to us in that sense. And so Jesus was fully human and fully God. And so when James chapter 1, verse 13 says, "For God cannot be tempted with evil," a lot of people get confused by that because Jesus was God and he was tempted. But we have to remember, even though Jesus was God, he was also fully human as well. And so that's why he was tempted. And so Satan was tempting him when he was in the wilderness and when he was fasting. He was trying to starve his flesh. And so he was fasting. He was trying to entice him and draw him away. He was tempting him at that time when he was fasting. So that's exactly what the devil and his demons do to us, and things like that, just like they did with Jesus. And so now Matthew chapter 4, verse 1 says, "Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil." So that's exactly what happened there. And this is also like Satan has done this since the beginning. Remember in the garden, Adam and Eve, he tempted Eve in the garden as well. And so yeah, he always does. He did that since the beginning. But another thing is Matthew chapter 6:13 says, "Lead us not into temptation." So a lot of people think that this is a contradiction in the Lord's Prayer because God doesn't lead people to temptation, but that's not what that is at all. It's just acknowledging what's already true, right? We're praying what is true already, that God isn't the tempter, he doesn't tempt us. And so we're just simply acknowledging what is true already in the Lord's Prayer. That's exactly why he put that in the Lord's Prayer, right? Lead us not into temptation. It's just an acknowledgement that God doesn't lead us into temptation. We're just praying that, right? So that's what it is. So it's not a contradiction like a lot of people think. It's just an acknowledgement of what is already true. And so it's important to realize that temptation is not sin, right? So, a lot of people think like when they're tempted that they sinned already, and I used to think that as well. And that's why like you end up doing the sin, right? Like if you're tempted to sin and then you end up sinning because you think you sinned already from the temptation. And so that's actually a lie from the devil. That's exactly what he tries to get people to think, and that's he wants you to sin, and that's one of his tactics, right? With this temptation, thinking that you already sinned already with the temptation, but that's not true, right? So he's just trying to get you to sin like he did with Job. And so he uses those temptations, and then you might think that you sinned already with the temptation, but temptation is not sin because Jesus was tempted as well, and he had no sin. And so 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13 says, "There hath no temptation taken you that but such is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may also bear it." So there's always a way to escape. So the temptation won't last forever. So don't think you sinned when you're tempted, right? God will always give you a way to escape. So I hope that was an encouragement, and I hope that explains what the Bible talks about when it comes to temptations. All right, God bless.